Picture this. It's a warm summer day in 1914, and the streets of Sarajevo are bustling with excitement. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, is in town for a visit. Little does he know, his life is about to change the course of history forever. As the Archduke's car rolls through the city, a young man named Gavrilo Princip steps out from the crowd. In a moment that would echo through time, he fires 2 shots, killing Franz Ferdinand and his wife. The world holds its breath, unaware that this single act would ignite a global conflict unlike anything seen before. Welcome to World War I, folks. Buckle up, because we are about to take a wild ride through one of the most devastating conflicts in human history. Now, you might be wondering, how did the death of one man lead to a world war? Well, let me tell you, it's like a giant game of dominoes. The assassination was just the first piece to fall. Soon, countries across Europe were choosing sides faster than kids picking teams for dodgeball. On one side, we have the Allied powers, Britain, France, and Russia. These guys were like the popular kids at school, with a bunch of smaller countries tagging along. On the other side, we've got the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. They were the underdogs, ready to prove themselves on the world stage. Before you could say, trench foot, soldiers from both sides were digging in for what they thought would be a quick and glorious war. Oh, how wrong they were. Instead of dashing cavalry charges and heroic duels, they found themselves stuck in a muddy, miserable stalemate. Picture this. Miles and miles of trenches stretching across Europe like a giant, deadly maze. Soldiers lived, ate, and slept in these muddy ditches, dodging bullets and shells, and battling rats the size of small dogs. It was like the world's worst camping trip, with added explosions. But wait, there's more. This war wasn't just about old school fighting. Oh no, the 20th century had some nasty surprises up its sleeve. Imagine being a soldier, minding your own business in your trench, when suddenly you see a strange cloud rolling towards you. That's right, folks, poison gas had entered the chat. This invisible killer would leave soldiers choking and gasping, changing the face of warfare forever. And let's not forget about the tanks. These metal monsters came rumbling onto the battlefield, looking like something out of a science fiction novel. Soldiers must have thought they were hallucinating the first time they saw these behemoths crawling across no man's land. But the war wasn't just confined to the muddy fields of Europe. Oh no, this was a world war, remember? The fighting spread like wildfire, reaching the deserts of the Middle East, the mountains of Italy, and even the high seas. Submarines prowled the oceans, sinking ships and striking fear into the hearts of sailors everywhere. As the years dragged on, the world grew weary of war. The fighting had taken its toll on everyone. Soldiers, civilians, and entire nations. It seemed like there was no end in sight. But then, in 1917, a new player entered the game, the United States of America. Picture Uncle Sam rolling up his sleeves and saying, "All right, let's sort this mess out." The arrival of fresh American troops was like a shot of espresso to the exhausted Allied forces. Suddenly, the tide of war began to turn. By 1918, the Central Powers were on their last legs. Germany, once so confident of victory, was now facing defeat. On November 11, 1918, in a railway carriage in a French forest, the guns finally fell silent. The armistice was signed, and the war to end all wars was over. But at what cost? The world had never seen destruction on this scale before. Over 15 million people had lost their lives. Empires that had stood for centuries crumbled like sandcastles. The map of Europe was redrawn, and the seeds of future conflicts were sown. As the dust settled, people tried to make sense of what had happened. They called it the Great War, the war to end all wars. If only they knew what the future held. World War I changed everything. It marked the end of the old world and the beginning of the modern age. New nations were born, old empires died, and the balance of power shifted. The world would never be the same again. But perhaps the most important legacy of World War I was the human one. Millions of young men had gone off to war, dreaming of glory and adventure. Those who returned came back changed, haunted by what they had seen and done. Their stories, their sacrifices, and their courage would be remembered for generations to come. And so, as we look back on World War I, we're reminded of the terrible cost of conflict, the bravery of those who fought, and the fragility of peace. It's a story of tragedy and triumph, of horror and heroism, a chapter in our history that we must never forget. Because, you see, understanding our past is the key to shaping our future. The lessons of World War, the dangers of nationalism, the horrors of modern warfare, the importance of diplomacy are just as relevant today as they were a century ago. So the next time you hear about World War I, don't just think of it as some dusty old history lesson. Remember that it was a time when the world changed forever, when ordinary people were called upon to do extraordinary things, and when the course of human history pivoted on the actions of a few. And who knows, maybe by understanding this crucial moment in our past, we can work towards building a more peaceful future. After all, isn't that what all those brave soldiers were fighting for in the first place?